Good morning. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that Western Arts Alliance stands in solidarity with Indigenous peoples and is based respectfully in the now occupied territories of the bands of the Chinook, the Multnomah, the Cathlamet, the Clackamas, the Tualatin and Kalapuya, the Molalla, and other tribes here known today as Portland, Oregon. The land upon which Portland was built at the confluence of the Columbia and the Willamette rivers has served for millennia as a gathering and trading place connecting resources from the mountains to the Pacific Ocean. Wherever you are calling in from or joining us this morning, we invite you to join us in honoring the ancestors who for millennia have been caretakers of the lands and resources upon which we live today. And we ask for you to share in our commitment to preserve them on behalf of generations to come. Welcome to the Future of Performing Arts Convening. Today's webinar is generously sponsored by Whitebird here in Portland, Oregon. And our distinguished panel is set to answer some really big questions that we've all been sort of wrestling with in the last few years. The pandemic has set the whole sector kind of on our heels for the last 2.5 years and laid bare kind of fault lines in our field. And how are we as service organizations and conveners responding? How do we make our gatherings more accessible, equitable, and sustainable? Is the Regional Performing Arts Conference done? What is the future of our performing arts conferences? And for that now, I'm delighted to introduce our moderator today, Ken Foster, Professor of Practice in the Thornton School of Music and Director of Arts Leadership at the University of Southern California. Prior to coming to USC, he had a successful career as an executive director of several arts organizations, as an arts leader, curator, educator, and performing arts professional. Ken is in high demand as a teacher and consultant on innovative organizational design, nationally and internationally. He's worked with arts organizations of all sizes and genres to develop and implement effective arts organizations practice in the contemporary world. And most importantly, for today's topic, Ken served on the APAP Board of Directors from 1993 to 2003 and chaired the board from 2000 to 2003. He received WAA's Jerry Willis Award in 2001 and APAP's Fran Taylor Distinguished Service Award in 2008. Welcome, Ken Foster.
Thank you, Tim. That was very kind of you, and I appreciate the introduction. Despite what my background is showing you, I am not in San Francisco. I am in Los Angeles, in the land of the Tongva, on the land of the Tongva people. And I'm delighted to be here with my colleagues to talk about what I think is a very interesting and provocative topic, and probably one that in some form or another, certainly the individuals on this session are thinking about, but I suspect many people in the field are thinking about as well. So we're going to have a kind of freewheeling conversation. We're going to talk conceptually. We're also going to talk logistically, and we're just going to explore kind of from various perspectives where we are and where you think we are going. So I'd like to begin by having the panelists introduce themselves. And when you introduce yourself, if in addition to your name and whatever else you want to tell us about yourself, if you could tell us what is talk a little bit about the core mission of your organization and what is the relationship of convenings to fulfilling that mission? How crucial is it? How is it? Is it central? Is it, what's the relationship? So we have a sense of where we are, because we have people from various different parts of the world, and not everybody, our assumptions may not be true about everybody in the room. So because we're doing this on Zoom, ordinarily I would say who wants to go first, but that will just be somewhat chaotic. So I'm going to guide us through this. And so let me start with Lisa Richards-Toney, who is the CEO of the Association of Performing Arts Professionals. Lisa?
Hi, Ken. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the welcoming, and so wonderful to be here. I'm coming to you from the indigenous lands of the Piscataway, Pamunkey, and Anacostan people, also known as Washington, D.C., where the APAP offices are located. Very happy to be here. APAP stands for the Association of Performing Arts Professionals, and we are the largest convener for North America for the presenting, booking, touring, and producing sector for the performing arts. Our conference every year is in January in New York City. And to answer the question rather quickly, convenings are our middle name. I mean, I think the convening is what we need, and it is essential for our field to do business. And APAP kind of stands at the cornerstone with all the convenings that happen from late summer through the fall. We're the ones in January where a lot of showcases happen and a lot of people seal the deal. This will be my first APAP conference as president and CEO. I can't wait. I can't imagine us not doing it. Everyone wants it and needs it. And the field depends on us for it. It was about 70% of our budget in terms of expenses and income for all the ancillary things that happen at conference as well. And the field has really struggled without convening in person. And so I'm looking forward to helping to rectify that.
Great. When you say this is your first conference, you mean it's your first conference live, right? Because
that is what I mean.
You did online.
Yeah, I did it online.
Right.
And after my opening speech, I cried because I said, we're supposed to be celebrating now and there's no one here. I'm in my home office.
I'm all by myself. Yeah,
So
I recall
we're going to celebrate together. It's time for us to come back together, let go of all the things that aren't working, rebuild together. And what a better way to do it than in person. I'm so excited.
Great. Thank you. Catherine, why don't we go next to you?
Thanks, Ken. Good morning, everyone. I'm Catherine Jones. I'm the Director of the Australian Performing Arts Market, or APAM. I'm joining today from the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation here in Melbourne, and I pay my respects to elders past and present and extend those respects to any First Nations people joining us today. If anyone needs a visual description, I'm a white woman with dark hair, dark glasses. I've got a black top on, and today I'm sitting in my kitchen against a white background. And my pronouns are she and her. APAM is an initiative, a strategic initiative of the Australia Council for the Arts, which is our federal arts funding and advisory body. And it's designed to showcase Australian and New Zealand contemporary dance, contemporary theatre, and emerging and experimental practice nationally and internationally. We've got a number of principles that guide the way we work. They are First Nations as central, experimentation, Asia focused, equitable and sustainable, reciprocity, and there's one more, I can't remember. And we do our work under three main mechanisms. The first is what we call the APAM office, and that's a very small staff resource based in Melbourne, but working nationally. And we're charged with connecting and brokering relationships for artists, producers, and presenters nationally and internationally. The second mechanism is what we call gathering, but is akin to performing arts conference, as you would describe it. We do those kind of once every 12 to 18 months. They're larger events that bring our performing arts community nationally together, and we welcome international participation in that, and that's really key. Our next big gathering will be in Melbourne in June next year, alongside Rising Festival. We're really looking forward to, that will be a hybrid event, but we're really looking forward to having people welcomed back into the country, because our borders have been closed for a number of years. And, you know, we've just haven't had the mobility that we had become accustomed to prior to the pandemic. And our third function is what we call market intelligence. It's really about gathering global market intelligence and then sharing that back with our sector. So we do that in a couple of different ways. We've got a really extensive database that's available to our sector to use. We also run a kind of Thoughts and Ideas program called the WAA, which is about sharing global market intelligence. We do that online on a monthly basis. And to go back to your central question, Ken, the Performing Arts Conference was, APAM's nearly 30 years old, but, for the bulk of the time that APAM has existed, over 26 years, the conference was the only mechanism by which APAM achieved its objectives of connecting and brokering. So, we've got a long history in that space, but even pre-pandemic, we were undertaking the work of trying to think about other mechanisms and who they might serve, and the way that we could continue to experiment and try and work differently, which I think we need to reflect the way that market mobility has changed, and will continue to change into the future.
Great. Lisa, I see you nodding your head. I'm going to go off script here a little bit. Would you say that the missions of your organization are very similar to what Catherine just described in terms of the conference as a central focus, but we have a larger mission of bringing people together kind of thing? Would you?
Yeah, absolutely. I was nodding a lot, and I'm also nodding because of, Catherine, it's wonderful that pre-pandemic you all were thinking this way. The board for APAP prior to my arrival had always known that the conference should not be the only thing we offer. And we have a program staff and we have other activities that happen throughout the year, but I'm very happy that we are being much more intentional about what we call year-round programming, offerings, and services. And it's just about what Catherine explained, really looking at how you're serving people, who you're serving, who has access to come. Not everybody can come to a conference. Not everybody can close that deal. Not everybody sees their work in the same way. Conference can appear very transactional for some types of work and types of artists, and they need a longer engagement. They need the pitch sessions that happen online. They need speed networking. They need PD, professional development, where they're constantly in the thinking mode, as opposed to slotting out what they do. They're developing work. They're creating it as they go. And our tent is really large, but I always tell folks, it's not full yet. The field is big, and thank goodness, we're continuing to develop new work. There's a greater sense of an attention paid to what it means to do this work equitably, what it means to create a sense of belonging, how people feel doing business, what that word is. Is it just commerce or is it more community? So there's a lot to discover in APAP. We've got all kinds, so it behooves us, and I'm very happy that we are starting that. At least 8 months out of that 12-month calendar year will be active online year-round programming through our online platform, which takes access to a whole nother level, which we learned during the pandemic. So that was our silver lining, is to learn that and to be able to try out some new technology, and now to be able to invest in more technology to be able to do that well.
Great, thanks. I really appreciate that. Anna, tell us about your conference, your organization, and the role of a conference in that, what it is you're trying to do.
Hi, well, I'm Ana Rodriguez. I come from Mexico, and I do represent managers through the organization. IMMF stands for the International Music Managers Forum. We are based in Luxembourg. We represent more than 50 countries. This is the first time that a chair, it's a woman, and it's Latin. So I am really proud of it, along with all my colleagues. So I am the outsider of this group. I do not represent any conference, although for the organization, since we gain relevance as our members get leverage. So because we're not a franchise, we are a trade organization. For us, the conferences are really important. They do play a role in our mission as an organization. So basically we have 4 parts of our mission. The first one, it's education and information, essential in attending conferences. Second one is fairness and transparency. Third one, plurality and diversity. And the fourth one is access to finance, which became really important after the pandemic. That was one that it was always left kind of behind, and it just became the center of the conversation. So for us, attending to conferences and get our members involved in their regional conferences and also global conferences is really important to share knowledge and information and really promote the developing of our work as managers. In the music field, the manager is the agent that comes across all sectors within the ecosystem. And so being well prepared is the fundamental part. We are in charge of the business model, of developing what the artist is creating. So I'm really happy to be here with all of you, and I hope I can bring a little bit of this outsider point of view to the conversation, but I'm truly hoping to hear from you what is that the conferences will offer to all of us in the future. I do have some ideas if you want to know.
Oh, great. Well, we will want to hear them. So if I understand correctly, you don't host a conference, but your members attend all these other conferences and are, at least certainly my experience with APAP, and I'm sure it's true with APAM as well, a critical piece of the conference, right? Like a seriously important constituency in the success of the conference, right? So I'll just say, I don't think you're an outsider. I think you're more of an insider with a voice that we need to, that we're really happy to hear and happy to get your perspective. So we want to hear your ideas for sure. Thanks, Anna. And Joshua. So Joshua, we know, is the new executive director of WAA. So tell us a little bit about your, at least for now, what your understanding of the mission of the organization, the role of the conference. The WAA conference is certainly a legendary one as well. And maybe a little bit about how you see that in the context of coming onto a new organization, coming new into an organization.
Sure. Well, thanks again for the welcome. And Anna, hey, we're all in the arts. And so technically we're all outsiders. And so welcome.
Right.
Right. I mean, I did theater in high school, so I know what that's about.
Right.
So again, my name is Joshua Heim, and I'm speaking from the traditional and unceded lands of the Muckleshoot and the Duwamish, the Snoqualmie and the Suquamish, otherwise known as Seattle, Washington. And like Ken said, I'm the incoming executive director at the Western Arts Alliance. And for over 50 years, we've been gathering our members at our annual conference to fulfill our mission, which is to advance performing arts presenting in the West. And for most of our history, as I have quickly learned from Tim, right, the conference was the primary vehicle by which we fulfilled our mission. And now it is one of many programs and initiatives that we have that drive us toward our vision and fulfill our mission. And I want to say I'm really grateful to everyone here. And I know for sure, Lisa, because I met you, Lisa, who came to our recent conference, which was in Calgary a few weeks ago, and to everyone listening in who also attended. And I think you guys will agree with me that it is so important that we meet face to face, because at least at WAA, we believe that the relationships are at the core of the enterprise of the performing arts, right? And it is these bonds and it is this trust that we have between presenters and agents and artists that then lead to the engaging and the critical seasons and the programs that are on our stages for our audiences throughout our communities. And for us, right, the conference is the keystone part of this relationship building, and it always has been, and I think it always will be. And what I'm really looking forward to in this conversation, and again, the conversation doesn't just stop here, and it's going to be ongoing for me as I step into this role and learn not only what it has been, but what it could be. I'm excited to discuss with you what that looks like in the future. So just thank you so much for having me here. And I look forward to hearing about everyone's conferences and what our swim lane is.
Right. That's great. So as you can see, audience, we have professionals from a variety of different backgrounds and locations, but also with a different range of histories with their organizations, from very long time to Joshua, who's brand new. So I think having that mix of different points of view will help us have a really rich conversation. I want to start by asking, so as you heard in Tim's introduction, I was on the board of APAP from 1993 to 2003. I don't think there was a moment in that 10 years that we were not discussing the conference and what is its purpose and why is it here and what are we doing with it and is it really serving and should we be changing or should we not? And to be frank, I always felt a little bit frustrated that there was a lot of conversation and no real energy or movement to make change. So one of the things that I think has happened to us because of the events in 2020, and I want to be sure that we recognize it's not just COVID, although that is a big one, but the emergence of the Black Lives Matter movement and the responses to the George Floyd murder, at least in our country, has been equally significant of a sort of sea change in the world that we're facing. Not to mention the climate change, the global climate change, where we used to be able to talk about just environmental shifts and things like that. We're now talking about a climate crisis. We're talking about potential death of the world. It's a serious issue that is right in our faces, and we cannot ignore it in any way any longer. So with that dire scenario, I'm curious if, and anybody can answer this, because we're now in 2022, so we're sort of still responding to what happened at the events of 2020. Is there anything, do you see your organization having experienced that time and that time period, and therefore having maybe a greater sense of urgency about addressing or changing or evolving or staying the same with what it is you're doing? Like, I just think it's such a pivotal moment. I want to hear if it's somehow really called the question, let me say, for you in terms of what we're doing. Because I always felt that we had the luxury of like, oh, it's always that way, and we just kept going. It feels like we can't do that anymore. So I'm just curious if from any of you, anybody can just jump in and start, and we'll do the best we can to get different points of view.
I'm happy to kick off, Ken. As I mentioned, APAM had in 2018-19 really started a process of changing the model by which we worked. And that was really driven by wanting to recognise how much the Australian performing arts sector had changed and evolved since APAM had started. You know, when APAM first started, we didn't have a lot of market maturity. We were really having to kind of lure international presenters, to Australia to come and discover the work of our artists. And I think, we were able to do that really successfully over many years. But, that the market environment had changed, and our sophistication and maturity as a sector had really grown. And so it was important for us to be thinking about what APAM, how that model needed to shift in order to recognise that and better serve artists, producers and presenters. So we had started doing that work, but I think what happened in 2020 with the level of disruption, we really had license to lean in and take those changes and shifts to an even greater extent. You know, we had just closed an event about 2 weeks before, certainly the Australian borders closed, and, you know, lots of us kind of went into lockdown. And at the time I was like, oh my God, you know,
Right, my
this
worst
is a
nightmare.
nightmare. But actually, you know, it really didn't take me long to kind of feel like, actually, no, this is really important. It's an important moment. It was important to think about, you know, we had already, as I said, started the work of trying to make the gathering a more equitable environment, to try and really think about how we shifted power dynamics, to kind of, you know, bring in our principles around sustainability, and recognize that we were in climate crisis, and how was our sector going to think about the role of mobility going forward? How are we going to facilitate leading that conversation? So we had started the work, but yeah, I think really that disruption just enabled us to lean in and go further. You know, we had to very, very quickly build our digital capacity. We didn't have any, and so that was, you know, a big part of the work that we were doing. But I think it was also, you know, an important moment, as we've all talked about, you know, in terms of social justice and equity reckoning as well. So yeah, I don't know. It feels to me like we were already on that journey, and so that was good for us. But yeah, we're emboldened by, you know, what's happened over the last couple of years.
Sure. Lisa, is that similar to the APAP trajectory?
It's a little similar, yeah. Interestingly enough, I'll start here. So when the pandemic first hit, and that was prior to my starting at APAP, I started officially at APAP July 1, although I started with Mario in June. I said, wow, I'm glad I'm not running an arts organization. In March, I said, oh my God, imagine having to refund tickets, and oh, it's just too much stress. And then I saw this job, and it's like, yeah, the whole, and I said, I think I could do that. Anyway, fast forward to actually coming into the job. One of the things I was most impressed with my first day, it was the day that, oh God, somehow it was a Monday, I do believe. And I forget, it was June 1 or something. And the George Floyd, it had already happened, the horrible murder, but there were some days, and it was the time in which everyone was saying, what are we going to do about it? And I watched from my home office with Mario by my side via Zoom or phone, and watched the board and the staff maneuver to get their voice together as to how they were going to respond. And I watched it with really curious eyes, because I was curious for, you know, is this going to actually happen? Can they work together? Do they all care enough? I had my own point of view. Is this just a statement, or will it resonate more deeply within the organization? And all of those things started to percolate on my email, and I was, you know, CC'd on them all. And I watched with really impressive eyes, because I said, okay, this is an organization that is committed, that has already had in place a value system that would question such an action, and not just question it, but really look internally to see how can we begin to reflect the solution. I was very proud to come to APAP, because as a start, they had already developed this committee called READI, where you heard our READI. We've used the REDI. That stands for Race, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And that committee is a board committee, and it's charged with really looking at our structures and our programs, as well as the experiences of members and the field at large, and to figure out ways to bring us closer to what's right, what it means to be truly equitable, what it means to value everyone at the table, what it means to value a multiplicity of voices, and do that in a just way. So we were grappling with that. And we did put out a statement, and I said, okay, I'm in the right space. They're ready. And another thing that struck me, you know, is that while it was horrible, again, the way in which our field has had to work over time. We have always had to make something out of nothing. We have always had to rely on one another. We have always worked beyond the contract, right? Because
Right.
some of those things aren't covered in words of the English language. We dealt with that too, the contracting and equity or lack of equity in that. So the reckoning came, and our organization, I think, was really right to handle it. And I was brought in, I'm a fixer. You know, I've solved problems. I started to accept that because that's why I'm hired usually. We have this major problem and we got to galvanize everybody and fix it. Okay. So I'm really happy that we were able to pull together. We were tighter than you. I mean, I love my staff and I love my board, and I had never really felt that way about work. Okay. And we pulled together because I had to make some of the hardest decisions. I was always told by members would tell me, you have had to make the hardest decisions we've ever seen. Funders would tell me, you have had to make the hardest decisions. Our budget was cut by way more than half. Okay, that didn't just mean letting go of people. That meant making choices to throw bathwater out with a baby, and you don't even know what the baby can do. Hey, new leader. But, you know, so it's a lot of conversation, a lot of strategy, and then not giving up, because I believe you cannot shrink in times of crisis. You actually have to align yourself so clear, but then dig deep to find the opportunity to soar. It's not a time to go smaller. You'll just melt. And that's the message we also wanted the field to understand. Even though you can't work, what is it that you can do? And so we got to work. You know, we were, and I think very appreciated with all of the resources we provided, the opportunities online, you know, to advocate. You know, we already knew, as Anna was saying, you know, we had a crisis in this climate. You know, we had climate change, and now we were dealing with touring, and what's going to happen, and what's a new model for that, and what about the issues are they seem insurmountable, but as I say, it just gives us new problems to solve. And so we really had to change the frame and to realize we were in a liminal space, and that space was going to be stronger if we came together. So I started with monthly real talk and real time sessions with the whole membership. You know, what transparent communication, whatever's on your mind, we have to solve it together. Agents and presenters on the same call. Yes, let's talk together. You know, it's not about this tangle war. Then the advocacy of the field and what it meant to actually survive with the SVOG grant money. You know, we had to get really dirty with that. It was a messy process because this field's ecosystem is very diverse. And if we only speak to one pocket, we're losing the battle. So we tried really hard to make sure that they understood that this ecosystem was vast, and every person had a different business model. We got to get to that one. But bottom line is they all had to have an opportunity within this. So there was just so much to do. So while we were all wondering and struggling and hoping, there was still a lot of work. The value of the service organization is to serve, is to find out what's happening with the core of your people and to get in there and help them fix it. You know, so there's nothing, I tell people all the time, I can sweep floors and I can put on pearls. I can do whatever needs to be done. You know, there's nothing that's too beneath us to help our field figure out how to prosper. So that's the attitude we had. I think, you know, people have stuck with us. I'm so proud and fortunate that that has been the case. And, you know, we have been able to now exercise some of those things that we're probably feeling like, when are we going to do something about the conflict?
Right,
But when 70% of your budget goes away, you know, and you have to now look at, you want to raise money, but funders don't give to an event. You have programs.
Yeah.
You have to provide actual programs, and you got to demonstrate that intervention of really supporting the field through not just one event.
Right.
So there was all kinds of things pressing the buttons, and we are actually moving forward on that. So it opened the door for us to be able to walk through
Yeah,
proudly.
it's great. Great. Anna, I'm curious from your perspective, how you are responding to this sort of that post because of that 2020 crisis, and in relationship to what you've heard from both from Lisa and from Catherine about their organizations.
So as I said before, the access to finance mission within our trade organization was always kind of left behind. And with the crisis, it became the top #1 priority. Since we are a global organization, we couldn't just provide the answer to everyone, you know. I do work also at the IMMF Mexico, for example. We do not have the same access to lobbying as my colleagues in IMMF US. And I was with them on the phone every week. They were trying to help us. There was no way. So what we really did change in this process, it was getting all our members to know that, as I said before, the relevance of the organization is the leverage of our members. But it seemed that in history, what they always were seeking within us, it was networking. And that was it. And it was not working like within their own like organizations with like colleagues around them, peer-to-peer, you know. So we were trying to like reinforce the peer-to-peer communications, like, I mean, by country and also regionally. So for example, with IMMF Latam, which is a like really special chapter because we represent 15 countries. We did that because we had countries in Latin America that they don't have a really strong industry. And the only way for their voices to be heard globally was to be part of a regional chapter. That's why we have the IMMF Latam. With the pandemic, we started working also a program with North America that now has a name and everything. It's called IMMF Connect. And we're working Canada, United States, and Mexico together with webinars. As everyone knows, right now, the biggest music business are held in the digital ecosystem. And there's no enough transparency for taking care of intellectual property, and also the data gap. You know, the artists don't own their own data. The data that they're putting out in the DSPs is not brought to them back. And also the legal part, it's not changing as fast as the industry is. So there is like this huge, enormous hole in there that obviously it was different for each country. So as I said, we were really pushing, we still do, we're pushing a lot for the organizations to really talk to their own regions and help their members to understand how building a voice together will give them the possibility to get not only better opportunities in terms of business, but also in terms of lobbying. That's something that we are seeing that is really important within our members. We're also working right now. So IMMF Mexico, for example, is an organization that was put together during the pandemic. And that was because, as Lisa was saying, everything that has to do with contracts, everything that has to do with social security for musicians and for staffs and for managers and from everyone in our field, it's not secure. So there was no one that could talk to our government in Mexico, for example, to ask for resources. So we put together the organization like in 3 months. Everything was thanks to a conference, to the conference here in Mexico, that it's taking place in Guadalajara. So they were the ones giving us all the back office to in order to put all that together in really short time. And also right now we're working with Africa, because it's the same thing. They have so much music in the digital space, and the income, it's not getting to the place that it should be getting to.
Yeah,
you know? It's
right,
just
right.
floating around in the hands of we don't know who. So yeah, we still working right now on everything that has to be done, and all the problems that the recent events just brought up. I think the organization until 2019, it was mostly European centered. Right now, also with Latin America being this amazing region for the music industry, and all this that we're doing with North America, all the events that we're doing and everything that we're building up. I think that also the organization is understanding how to work by regions, as I said, but that also has to do with raising money, because we couldn't be raising money only in Europe, because in that way, all the programs had to be for Europe. And so right now we are really working, trying to work globally. It's a huge challenge. I also love everyone that works with me. It's, I think right now there's a lot of young people involved, which is super
That's great.
empowering. It's just, yeah, it's just amazing. And I know there's a lot that we still have to do. We are really changing our the ways that things were handled. And well, I see a bright future.
Good. What I'm hearing is sort of reinforcing what both Lisa and Catherine said, in terms of the urgency of the moment forced a certain degree of action, logistically for sure. Like things we had to find money, we had to figure out how things were going to happen. And for each of you, and being sort of the centralized force, you have that ability that individual presenters, individual artists, individual managers might be floundering. They appreciate that support, certainly logistically, but also conceptually, in terms of the coming together, the engaging with each other, the collective, like what is happening and how are you handling it kind of thing. And I think, even though none of you said this directly, what I'm hearing is a sort of a safety place where we're all in this together, and sort of creating that, which for many arts leaders feeling so isolated in their own organization, in their own community, nobody else is feeling what I'm feeling or experiencing what I'm experiencing. So I think that's a really important piece. But I hear that sense of urgency in the sort of yeoman effort that you made at that time. So I'm going to turn to Josh now, who is taking over post-pandemic, if you will, or certainly 2 years later than the events of 2020. And I'm just wondering if you have an idea, a vision, if you're thinking of a strategy in relationship to WAA in this new environment. So less about what did we do during those 2 years, how did we scramble, but more about what are you thinking as you're moving forward? What are you seeing ahead for the organization? Again, particularly as it relates to the conference, but more generally as well, because I think we can't really separate the two things.
Yeah, and so, wow, that's more than a question. That's a strategic plan you're asking from me. Technically, I'm actually not on the job yet, so I'm going to defer to Tim for the next 2 days, I think. No, but I think what am I bringing to this organization? I am bringing, I think, our lived experience, which tells us that we all suffer. right? And the way that we suffer, right? So, I mean, if you boil down COVID, let's just take that for instance, right? It is a pandemic that preyed upon people with pre-existing conditions. We know that health-wise. I think the way we experience that in the arts, and probably this is the way that it has unfolded in all other industries, is that it just brought to the surface all the things that were broken. And it made them worse. And they made, right, like, you can't stop looking at it. For me, the two things that really that were laid bare are the ways in which we treat artists, and how, although we here all believe that art should be thriving, I still think we live in a context in which the preeminent way that we see artists is that they're starving. And we pay them that way. We have our systems that are built around free labor or volunteerism. And the other thing that I think was laid bare is racial equity, right? There's a reckoning that we have to make on our stages and in our communities. And that's a lot of work to do moving forward. So the questions that I have actually coming into WAA, right? I mean, so there's the mission. Our mission right now is to advance excellence, which has served us for a very long time. And it's the mission on paper, but really, as I get to know WAA, sort of the day-to-day mission, right? These issues of equity, have been with, it's been a conversation that has been, I think, front of mind for a very long time. It's what in part has attracted me to the organization. Going back to the conference, I think it was back in 2016, 2015, where we were in Vancouver, and that community in Canada in particular, right? They showed us what it means to take care of not only artists, but Indigenous artists. And that became the inspiration for what is now our Advancing Indigenous Performance Initiative and Program, AIP, which actually is our largest program, both monetarily and like time-wise. It's not the conference anymore. Similarly, right, we've had a number of WAA institutes. We've had one focused on, I believe it was 2015 in San Antonio, around Conexiones and the Latinx experience in the arts. And I think maybe a few years before that or after that was in LA around Black arts. And that's when we brought Patrice Cullors, right? We all know she's one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter, as a keynote speaker to kick off that experience and that learning opportunity. And so I think what's great about WAA, what I find as an asset is that, right, there has been not only a commitment, but an evolution, right? It's not that, 2020 happened and now we got to figure out, right, how do we work around force majeure, and how do we make sure that artists get paid living wages, and what do we do about racial equity? No, WAA has actually been painstakingly over the years, over many decades, weaving in these central conversations. And so the things that I hope to do when I go to WAA, so one is I want to ask the question about, so what is the infrastructure that's going to support equity? And that's something I would love to hear from Lisa and Catherine and Anna here. I've started to hear a little bit of it, right? I mean, I think we're still all in, I mean, I know it's 2 years past, but it's still a fresh crisis, right? We are still on ground zero, like dealing with it. And of course we're action oriented, but I think the telltale sign of whether or not we as an industry is actually going to change is whether or not our organizations change. And we're going to see that in the infrastructure, right? How do we organize our staff? What sort of policies and mechanisms do we have, right? So that in the future, those crises are no longer crises because we have in place the people and the processes to respond and respond rightly and quickly. So that's one thing I bring. I think the other thing I bring, and I'm going to be interested, particularly in the conference, right, is this question about, is equity a business problem for us to solve at our conference? And is the well-being of our artists a business question that ought to be solved at our conferences? And I don't know that. I've been to our conference a few weeks back once, and we did have sort of a parallel track of our AIP program that did sort of permeate the core of the commons, which is sort of our version of the exhibit hall, which is where those relationships between presenters and agents are taking place. And so I'm just really curious, to hear from Lisa and Catherine and Anna, how do you see these questions? Are these peripheral to the conference and to the business of the performing arts that our conferences support? Are they integral? And then also, what does infrastructure that support equity and the thriving artists look like?
Oh, all right. That's great. I'm curious if any of you would like to respond to especially the last questions that he's put out. Lisa?
Okay, dissertation questions. I love it. Josh, welcome, Josh. Oh, it's so nice to engage with you. Let me answer part of it. So structure, infrastructure, yes. Take the APAP Ready pledge, the 10, 20, 30 pledge, which we are offering to the field as a pledge to commit to racial equity, diversity, and inclusion in your operations, in your programming, in your finances. It asks you to understand that, if you haven't been doing this work, it could be a 10-year process to really align, to develop, figure out, and then align, because the alignment is key. You got to get people on board. That's really important to APAP, and I think to all the people who have taken that pledge, the organizations and the individuals, because the reality is that change is slow. And so while, oh man, yes, I want to solve the problem through one panel, where one panelist says, wake up, and you should just be awake, right? You're woke now. But the reality is that the infrastructure, these institutions of supremacy, of all these things, it's not as easy to change, because people try to change and then they make silly comments like, oh, look at all the new people coming into our field, this young, because they may be someone of color. And it's like, they may be older than you. You are not the center of the universe of this field. So change happens slowly. It happens on paper, then it happens by practice, then it has to happen in the heart, in the mind, and the soul. And that's what the mouth and the voice then reflects. So I'm waiting on it, and I'm hoping that what we're offering is also, hopefully, a safe space so that you can fail forward. You can mess up. I'm not going to judge you. I'm going to hug you. I'm not going to call you out. I'm going to call you in. I'm not going to blast it out. I'm going to have a personal conversation with you, because that's what it's going to take to do these kinds of things. And yes, I think that our doing business is not in opposition to solving these problems, because doing business is about developing community and being in community with the people who are in this field, period. That's my point of view on that part. You asked a lot, but let's let Catherine or Anna come in, because you have a lot of questions.
No, and you said a lot that's really great. I'm going to come back to some of the things you brought up. It's great. Catherine, Anna, do you want to chime in?
I just really agree with Lisa that, we're not making either or decisions. We are working across the spectrum, and we're working actively to do that. I think one of the things that I just wanted to respond to Josh about was in thinking about resources and infrastructure. One of the changes that we did make in 2019 was to move the way that we gathered. So we always work alongside an existing festival now in Australia. And we do that for a number of reasons, because, the cost of showcasing was really being borne by the artists, and if you want to talk about, free labor and volunteerism, that's a prime example of it. So the way we work now is that when you come to APAM, to an APAM gathering, you see the works of showcase artists within that context of that festival. So they've been curated, by the partner festival. It means that we see those works in full length with full production values. The artists have been paid, and that shifted the economic burden of showcasing from artists into existing presentation infrastructure. So, I think there's no doubt that we need to do more of that. We need to try and find more collaborative solutions about the way that we have worked and will continue to work. But, I guess I really, really think that digital is a very, very important tool in creating equity and access. We've committed to doing everything, going forward in a hybrid way, because, we obviously don't live in a country the size of the US, but we live over a really vast geographical, area. And so even as a country, it's very expensive to come to APAM. One of our principles is to be Asia focused and to be committed to our region within the Asia Pacific. And again, digital is a way that gives access and inclusion, in a way that is much more affordable. Again, I think, sustainable as well. So yeah, I think it is about, challenging assumptions and really thinking about how do we, we're not going to solve it on our own. APAM is tiny. APAP is probably bigger than us, but tiny as well. Like we actually need to be collaborative within the sector. We need to be trying to figure out solutions by working together, because we're not going to achieve it all on our own.
So I'm really glad you brought up the digital thing, if I could just push on a little bit, because this is something that I've been thinking a lot about. Clearly when we all had to retreat to our homes and we found creative ways to be digitally present with each other, whether it's through meetings or engagements, but also through performances. Yet all of us, I think, are representing a field that is committed to the live performance experience. So I'm curious to know how you are thinking about integrating. We talk about hybrid. Are you thinking how much digital access are we having, and what does that look like? At what point, as representative service organizations for live performing arts, do we feel like we've sort of tipped the balance away from the live experience and so privilege the digital experience that our live experience becomes less valuable? It's just, I know there's no easy answer to that, but I'm just curious about how you must be hearing from people saying it's not the same. You must be hearing, Catherine, from people saying it's no fair that only people who got into the festival get to perform. What about me? I didn't make it to the festival. How fair is that? So how, but focusing on the digital piece in particular, how are you all sort of balancing that or integrating that or thinking about that? I'm fascinated.
I can, if I could just quickly respond, because I want to hand it to someone else. But for me, again, I'm just not interested in false binaries. I'm not interested in digital versus live. I just think that is so unnuanced and really unhelpful. It is about it is about a spectrum of opportunity. And I think we also just have to lighten up and go, we're in transition, I don't know so much about where things are at in North America, but in Australia, we have not had good strategic investment and policy in digital performing arts at all. And so we are playing catch up big time. We look at the UK, who are 15, 20 years ahead of us, and go, wow, okay, that's where we can get to, but we're scrambling. And I think as a sector, we're in transition. We've gone from, we had no digital capacity in 2020, and so we've had to build that really quickly. Maybe the balance is tipped at the moment, but it's gonna work itself out. I just feel like we've got to we just got to maintain the commitment and always be trying to experiment. That for me is key. Like, you know, I just think that it's really fundamental to the way that we're trying to work at APAM. You know, it's not about whether you succeed or fail. It's that you just keep looking at different ways of doing things continuously, because I think that's how we're going to find the innovation.
Lisa, Catherine, do you have Lisa, Anna, do you have want to respond to the digital thing?
Yeah, well, I just want to mention that for the IMMF also, the meetings, our AGM was always held during Reaper Band, which was nuts for a manager from Bolivia to travel to Hamburgo just to be able to vote on a decision, you know? So that just changed everything for us. Now the AGM is held digitally in different time zones. We just do the same agenda, record all the meetings, and do the voting online. That just changed completely everything. You know, it was totally about access and equity and everything. And talking about this digital or live, I totally agree with Catherine. It's not about an or, it's and. As I mentioned before, in music, the largest business are done in the digital space. So right now, to think that the only way that you can get a contract or get some money, it's through the live sector, it's completely, I don't want to say wrong, but it's completely narrow vision. Today, you can start developing another market, like an international market, with content, with recorded music, with video content. So yeah, I definitely think that this is more of a challenge of learning how to build narratives about your creation in different ways. Also for musicians, building, for example, a musical content in video gives them different opportunities than doing it on stage live. You know, you can build a completely different narrative. Right. So yeah, it's about being mind open and creative and just like find a way to just explore options, you know. And about the conferences and the showcasing, I did experience some really good performances recorded in Colombia in one conference that is held in Medellin. And they did a really good job with the artists that were selected for them to put together like showcases on video, but with really well, it was not just about the production, it was about the narrative. So everyone that was on the theater looking, the screen was huge. It gave us the sense that we were really in front of the band, but we also got the chance to get something else from the bands that we didn't get on the showcases. So we had a little bit of their context, and not history, but more about their context and how they make their like creative decisions and how they were making their music and what was the meaning for that. And I don't know, it was a really good experience. It was something completely different. And now I'm seeing conferences do both things. And
Lisa,
the festival part,
that's
how we're doing it here. Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No,
Yeah, I agree. It's nice to hear, you know, a release on the dichotomy of either or. I think that's what, you know, we're just all trying what we think can work here. But one thing we've been really trying to be intentional about is when we are planning for an in-person event, such as the conference in January, making sure that that in-person space is really intentional on the things that we really missed out on and maybe have taken for granted in previous times,
Mm.
right? So, you know, how do you orchestrate a meeting and space when you're together? What are the things that you need to discuss that you can't do over Zoom because this format is one-dimensional, you know, whatever it may be. So asking those questions of your team and really thinking deeply about, we're bringing people together. How do we do it creatively? How do we make it meaningful? So because there's so much appreciation for what it means to maybe hug someone, if you allow hugs, or what it means to, you know, engage. And so we miss that. We got a lot of business done. Like the meeting starts at 2 o'clock. People show up on Zoom. It starts at 2 o'clock. There's no chit chatting about, it's really strange, right? Like, well, you know, we can chit chat about your weekend. It looks really weird because you're just in this box. So we've been thinking about how do you become really intentional about meeting space in person, and what can be done on Zoom. And what can be done on Zoom is important because, I mean, it was many years since I'd attended APAP, but the word on the street is that APAP wears you out. And we are paying more attention to the wellness of our people. I mean, our conferences are the mechanism for most of our field, at least those who subscribe to this way of working, to do business. And so if it's just overloaded with everything you're supposed to be at, everything, it's impossible to achieve, right? So being thoughtful about what you decide to say yes to and what you decide in person and what you decide to say yes to online, to give people more of a relaxed way of approaching certain things. There's a pre-con now, right? There's always been pre-con, or in post-con. This is a post-con. What are the kinds of opportunities that can happen after the fact, and what can happen before, to even prepare people for that in-person time? So I think these are the kinds of questions that we'll start to ask ourselves very intentionally. I also want to just mention the whole idea of mentoring, which is a big deal in our field and at APAP too. And one of the things that I dream about, so when we had our online conference for the 2 years, and I really noticed it last year, it was so wonderful. Like newcomers to conference could say, I have a question about, I don't know, you know, presenting an event at a certain time, I don't know. And anybody could respond to it. You didn't have to have a special lunch, or, you know, you were the chosen one to get that cocktail at the bar and have that conversation. Anyone and could respond to it, and anyone could read it. So again, that access of being able to get advice, strategy, feedback is there, and the online mechanism helps us do it. I love that. I also note that when we think about mentoring in person, or just the opportunities to answer this question, we have to look at mentoring as a cyclical thing and not just someone who's a veteran in the field and someone who's new. I think these new folks have a lot to teach the veterans, right? So the mentoring is now, I feel, and I hope, and I'm working on something about this, going to be much more cyclical. And that'll keep us all fresh, because these kinds of questions and how we, you know, even the format of these things, you know, this will be old school in a minute. Squares on a box, oh man, we'll just be coming in and out. I don't know. There'll be so many new innovations in this area. So I look forward to it.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. At least I recall as you were talking, the sort of the word on the street was always the real value of the conference was what happened in between the sessions. The people I ran into in the hall, that I saw at the bar, that I met at a show, that we wound up with this conversation, and that, you know, sometimes led to a booking, but more often it just led to a feeling of belonging, being part of a field, being with colleagues who are really important, have shared values. So many of us work in this world in which we're kind of like pushing against a system that doesn't necessarily value what we do in the way that we do. And so to be among people who are like-minded people who feel that way, I think was always a real benefit. We've unbelievably we've run out of time, but I don't want to stop here. What I would like to ask is to give each one of you a chance to say something that you're seeing as you look forward with your organization and with your conference, something about that you are particularly excited about, that you really want to share with us, to say, this is how we have sort of remade ourselves or are rethinking ourselves in light of the events of the last 2 years and how that's transformed the field. Some could be conceptual, could be something very specific. Lisa told us about the 10-20-30 program, you know, but what are you like really jazzed about in terms of we're going ahead and this is really exciting for us? Who wants to start? I'm teaching my class again. I ask a question and no one I saw your hand, Anna. Go ahead.
I'll go. So we are working on. So our primary goal, as I said before, it's to allow the peer-to-peer communication, and that was not done before because everything was done through the chairs of the chapters, of the different chapters, but not among members of each chapter. And what Lisa was saying about the mentoring sessions, we did something like that. And it was amazing how a manager from Croatia was giving an answer to a manager from the UK.
Right.
That in our mind, that manager from the UK was coming from this mature market.
Right.
And the Croatian manager, no, you know, so like breaking those barriers, that's our main goal right now. So we're working on helping us through a platform so that we can make available to all the members of the different chapters to be able to communicate to each other and do so by like different themes or different projects or so. Yeah, I think that's the most.
That's great.
Like,
I love that idea.
Yeah,
I love that idea. And Lisa referenced that as well. Wisdom does not reside only in people who have been in the hierarchy at the top for a really long time. Wisdom is throughout, and that kind of conversation in multiple directions is so healthy for those of us who have been in the field for a long time, as well as our colleagues who are just entering and have fresh ideas and new innovations and new ways of thinking that we never thought of. So
yeah, that they challenge the business models with no problem.
yes, exactly. Which is like, yeah, we really need that to happen, right?
Exactly.
Okay, who wants to go next?
I can go next.
Thank you, Lisa.
So the APAP board and staff met in April in person. It was our first time meeting all of my board members. It was exciting. And we've decided that as part of our strategic planning process, which is shortly to commence as a full, robust one, we want to place equity, inclusion, and belonging at the center of everything we do. And as I think about all the things that we're doing to live out our mission and our vision, we're doing that. And that's what we want to be known for. And that's what we want the field to become. We want the field to take seriously the pledge, the 10-20-30 pledge for racial equity, diversity, and inclusion. We want to champion the arts worker and the labor of this field so that we have more equity there. We want to champion health and wellness as a value for a better way of working and sustaining ourselves in this field. We want to champion the APAP 365 platform and our technology as a way to increase access and expand resources so that people can do business on their own terms. And we want to champion advocating as one entity, artists, agents and managers, presenters, producers, funders, and everybody else in between, and all of the roles they play on the ecosystem. And all of that is about creating a stronger sense of belonging and purpose, so that we're no longer, hopefully one day, at the bottom of the totem pole for the national agenda for this country and other countries in this world. So we know our value, and we're beginning to articulate that on many levels in the arts, but also in health, in economics, in finance, in politics. We're putting the whole puzzle together. We're all one person, and we cannot be divided. And so that's what equity and inclusion and belonging is about. It's a big story.
Yeah,
Happy to tell it.
that is great. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's very inspiring. Catherine, you want to go next?
Yeah, happy to. Ahead of the gathering at Rising next June, we're really, because we're going to have the opportunity to have people back in the country, we've been really thinking about place and relationship to place. You know, if you're going to make this trip, you know, to Melbourne, what are you going to understand about the place, the people, the artists that are making work while you're here? We're really fortunate that we've got an incredible First Nations advisory group that guides a lot of our work. And they've been talking to us about the role of traditional owner hosting. So what does it mean to be welcome to country, to understand country and the relationship of the traditional owners to the land that, you know, we're all visitors to. So we're thinking a lot about that in the structure of our 5 days in person, and particularly that very first day. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure what all of it looks like yet, but yeah, I feel really excited about what that opportunity is going to be and what experience it's going to give anyone who joins us in Melbourne next year.
That's great. That's also very inspiring to think about that in terms of place and the way that you structured that. I can just imagine how it will manifest itself in all kinds of ways. It's really beautiful. Thank you so much. And Josh, I'm sure you've got like a wide open road ahead of you. What are you excited about? What do you see? What's going to happen?
Mostly excited about starting my first days. And then I get to see all the surprises that lay for me.
Yeah, the things Tim
right?
didn't tell you yet.
Indeed. No, Tim's been great. We've been on the phone every other day, just catching up on things, you know, sort of mundane, but also big conceptual. And so, goodness gracious. And he's going to be on. He'll stay with us at least through the end of the year as both a thought partner and helping to make a smooth transition. So I really look forward to working with him, and of course all the staff who are incredible. I'm super excited that our next year's conference is going to be in Seattle. So right now, my current hometown. And so, you know, I can't promise all the changes that are going to happen, but I can promise that we're going to show you a good time. Seattle's a fun town, but there's also a lot of really interesting conversations that are happening that around equity. I mean, if you're into theater, the revolutions that are happening here are incredible, and I hope we find a way to you know, weave that conversation into the conference, either before as a pre-con or sort of central to it. But you know, and thank you, Catherine, for you know what you just talked about as far as the importance of place, because and I don't know if this is exciting. I don't know if I'm going to like excite my fellow colleagues or just like, you know, instill.
If you're excited, that's what counts.
Indeed, right. But like, you know, I feel like there's kind of two people, you know, in the world. So I feel like the Boy Scouts, right? And the Boy Scouts believe that, you know, you go to a place, you leave no trace. And then there's me, and then there's those of us maybe who come up. I came up through community organizing and social justice movements, and I believe that, you know, when you leave a place better than when you found it. And so, and this is kind of just what I'm thinking about. I don't even know if it's a good idea, but as we go to Seattle, and then I believe we go to San Diego after that, I'm starting to think or ask the question, like, what does it mean for us to come to town and leave it better than when we found it, right? Like, we all come in, right? We are all part of, I mean, some ways, right? Touring, it's somewhat of an extractive industry. Right. So what does it look like if we were able to leave? And what is it? Is it infrastructure? Is it knowledge? People, right? Experiences and memories? I don't know. And that's something that over the next year with Jennifer, our conference manager, and the rest of our staff, and then with all of you all, I'm curious, like, what is it? What can we leave, right? In this world of, you know, of seeing a place for its assets and being part of something greater, as I think, Catherine, you were talking about earlier. So that's what I'm excited to start to sort of roll my sleeves up and start thinking about.
Thank you. That's amazing. And I just want to say how excited and interesting it's been to be part of this conversation and to hear the visions that each of you have for going forward, which are so compelling and so thoughtful. And really, well, for one, I want to go to all your conferences, but then it's just like, it establishes this sense of purpose and forward thinking for our field that I think is very energizing for all of us. So to all of you, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and ideas. To all of the people who are watching this, I know these people cannot do it alone. They need your support and participation and your enthusiasm, and don't pick at them if you don't like the way it's going. Just get on board and keep working at it. I feel very enthusiastic about our future, and thank you so much for everything that you do. I know you have very difficult jobs, and I really appreciate the work that you do. So thank you very much. Tim, I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Ken, for the excellent moderation today. And thanks again to Catherine, Anna, and Lisa, and Josh. And you can all understand why I am so relieved to be handing the baton over to Josh, and delighted to see how you can build WAA in new and exciting ways. So I'm very thrilled, to have you on as the team and to be a part of this transition with you. So I also need to thank our friends at Whitebird, Graham, Paul, and Walter for sponsoring today's webinar. And thanks again to everyone for tuning in and watching this morning. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.